Your review chose. I'm gonna react to It's time to be honest about the game. Let's hear some honesty about the game.
The game just dropped one of the best records he's released in years. It's called 87 Cutlass. It's fire. He's talking
I never heard of that song. I never heard the song.
about putting his beef with 50 to rest,
I ain't tripping on 50, all that shit I left behind.
his bad deal with Interscope Records,
Ain't tripping on Interscope for that slave deal that I signed.
the violence that his family experienced growing up,
I'm hiding in the neighbor's house. Mom's kicked me out, had to move all my shit to David House.
and the subject matter within this record seems to be a lot more mature than any of the music or behavior that we've seen from Game in the last couple years. I would say even the last 2 decades if we're being real. But unlike Game's toddler-like behavior over the last few years where he's beefed with Eminem, Dr. Dre, Rick Ross, Jay-Z, Lil Durk, 50 Cent, Meek Mill, Chris Brown, Gucci Mane, Sean Kingston, and more. And wow, that was a mouthful, no Diddy. Drop a like for my breath control. Pause. But yeah, all that beefing has gotten the game tons of attention, and that's to be expected, right? People love a negative headline, drama sells, but it's crazy to me that he could get millions of views by beefing someone, but this recent record he released can't even crack 200k views on YouTube. To put into perspective, I think Kendrick Lamar did 200k views in the first 5 minutes when he released his Not Like Us music video. So yeah, with amazing music like this going completely
I mean, Game. I don't feel like that's true because Game has some songs that has has millions that he don't diss, bro. Like he has some records that did well that he don't did, that he's not dissing nobody. Like he did some he like y'all get what I'm trying to say. Like Game has some songs he has some songs that got 200k over that he don't diss nobody. That's so yeah.
under the radar for the game. It begs the question, he has a new album releasing in the next few months. Will he ever be able to regain that mainstream success that he once had? I mean, he's 20 years deep into his career, right? So most rappers kind of hit a ceiling and can't recreate the same moments that they made at a younger age. But let's take a look at his freshman class and see where they were at.
There's a lot of little nuggets in both of their disses that if it wasn't for these breakdowns, and salute to guys like this, Rapaholics, because I think they directly get it.
See, their game came up in around 2004. He was discovered by Dr. Dre. Dr. Dre linked him up with 50 Cent, and he released his massive debut album, The Documentary, in 2005. Around that same time, you had Kanye West.
People said that was the Game's best album, bro. What y'all think, bro? Do y'all think it's the Game's best album? Let me know.
Riding high off the release and success of his first album called Dropout. He had Lil Wayne, who just released his first Carter album, separating himself from the Hot Boys and calling himself the best rapper alive. You had Ludacris, who was dropping #1 hit singles left and right. You had T.I. and Jeezy, who were revolutionizing trap music. You had Rick Ross, who just put out his first hit, Every Day I'm Hustling. You had Pusha T, who was gearing up to drop his second album with his brother as The Clips. And look where they're all at today, right? Lil Wayne's a legend. He ushered in the new generation of rappers and brought in the 2 biggest rappers in the game today, Drake and Nicki Minaj. You had Kanye West, who released his debut album around the same time as the game released his debut album. Funny enough, on their first albums, both of them sold around the same amount, but Kanye today is a billionaire. Then you had Ludacris, who went from dropping #1 singles to dropping #1 movies. You have Rick Ross, who's got Buffaloes and a private jet. T.I. and Jeezy have multiple business ventures, starred in movies, they're happily married. Pusha T still dropping classic albums today, and put the first massive chink in the armor of the biggest rapper in the game, Drizzy Drake. Meanwhile, where's the
Pusha won that battle with Drake.
game? The guy who signed him, 50 Cent, is doing arena tours and making hundreds of millions of dollars off of those tours and his TV shows. Meanwhile, the game maintains relevance by starting petty beefs, doing Vlad TV interviews, and no hate to Vlad at all, I love his content, but I feel like he's more of a platform that artists go to discuss and reflect the highlights or the primes in their careers, or current events. I feel like Vlad has helped revive a lot of careers, but I don't think it's necessarily where rappers do interviews at to promote something when they're still in their prime. I feel like that's more the Breakfast Club's niche. Like, I can't see 50 Cent going on Vlad TV to do an interview today.
50 Cent's never gonna do that Vlad interview. He's never gonna do a Vlad interview.
while the Game is up there doing 2-hour monologues about all the beefs that he's had throughout his career. And that begs the question, what's stopping the Game from having that same success that 50 Cent currently has? I mean, look at Drake and Lil Wayne, or Kanye and Jay-Z. With the right moves, the student always becomes the master. And in terms of rapping, 50 Cent was on his way out around that same time that the Game was just reaching his prime lyrically. And as 50 was 1 foot out the door in hip-hop, the Game was still dropping hits consistently. So on paper, he should be a lot bigger than he is. And anyone who says otherwise is just dumb. I mean, the guy's been rapping at an extremely high level for the past 2 decades. But the bigger problem is that the Game is not necessarily blackballed, but he is definitely not liked by most of the industry. And while the Game has produced classic albums, his legacy will also be made up of the countless petty beefs that the Game has started in an attempt to
Some of the games, like, some of the games beef be pointless, bro. Be mad pointless. I'm not gonna lie. Be mad pointless. Like, bro, come on, son. Like, come on, bro. Like, you really not have to, like, come on, like, feel me?
chase clout. What I mean by Game not being liked and being a clout chaser, and the two kind of working symbiotically to continue tarnishing his reputation and make him less and less liked by more and more people. A prime example of this was the most recent reason the Game was in the headlines. It raised a lot of eyebrows when he was left off the music video of Kendrick Lamar's record Not Like Us, and he was noticeably missing from Kendrick's concert, the Pop-Out Show. I mean, the music video was filmed in LA, there were scenes outside the Compton courthouse, there was multiple appearances from all of Kendrick's TDE record label mates. YG, DJ Mustard, Roddy Ricch, a bunch of West Coast artists and legends made appearances in the music video and also supported Kendrick by coming out at his pop-out show. Even Dr. Dre was at the concert, and it seemed like the Game just didn't cop the invite because he proceeded to go on a 17-minute rant about basically absolutely nothing. I mean, he was defending his legacy within LA, basically saying that just because he wasn't at Kendrick's show doesn't mean he's not loved in LA. But at the Game's age, with the accomplishments that he has, with the classic albums that he has, he shouldn't feel the need to have to defend his legacy and his influence within LA in a 17-minute rant. I mean, it's just ridiculous. He also shouldn't have felt the need to jump into this recent Drake beef, but he did it anyways to diss Rick Ross for apparently no reason. He dropped this track, Freeway's Revenge.
That song was fire, though. It was a fire diss track. I ain't gonna lie.
And basically begged Rick Ross to respond to it. I mean, even worse than Drake was begging Kendrick to respond before he dropped Euphoria. I mean, Rick Ross was someone who the Game collaborated with for many, many years. They have classic records together. Like, there seemed to be no real reason why he was trying to start beef with Rick Ross other than to clout chase. But there is a reason. See, the Game to beef is like a fat guy to McDonald's. Like, when he smells those fries, he's ordering a supersize. When the Game smells beef going on, he tries his hardest to jump in it. I did a full breakdown, I'll leave it in the description, of every single beef that the Game has been a part of, but this video is more about why the Game is so hated. And even though he's arguably putting out better, or at least more music than most of the guys that came up in the same era as him, he's way less beloved and praised as a legend. And it really stems back to his outbursts. He's not liked in the industry, and he's not respected as a top-tier rapper because of his outbursts. Whether it's in his music or in his interviews, he always seems to make himself look desperate for conflict. When Dr. Dre performed at the Super Bowl and brought out Eminem, 50 Cent, Kendrick Lamar, Snoop Dogg, Mary J. Blige, Anderson .Paak, and more, the Game got his feelings hurt that, just like with the Kendrick Lamar concert, he wasn't invited to this concert, and he went on an absolute rampage about Dr. Dre in multiple interviews. Then he proceeds to drop a 9-minute diss track about Eminem, even bringing Eminem's daughter into it, commenting on her Instagram pics. And I mean, that's not all. One day he's beefing with 50 Cent, one day he's not. Even on his new song, he's talking about how he had a phone call with Meek Mill because Meek Mill was thinking of moving to LA, and the Game was reflecting on how Meek Mill used to be his op.
Got Meek on a song after this, and he used to be my op.
But if you were around for that beef back in 2016, then you know it was over absolute nonsense. I'll read you guys the Game's explanation of that beef, and you tell me what you think. Game basically said, what happened was we were in the club. It was Meek's first time back in LA since his whole house arrest, and he couldn't move. The Game then sends a bottle of rosé to Meek Mill's table, and he told Meek how people have been getting robbed in Los Angeles. And the Game even also encouraged Meek Mill to leave the club a little early to stay out of trouble. At that same time, according to the Game, Sean Kingston's table was also right next to Meek's. Game continues by saying, Meek leaves the club, then an hour later, Sean Kingston gets robbed, knocked in the head. They took his jewelry, ran through his crew, so we left. Later, Sean Kingston called me 15 minutes after that, and he was like, Game, that's effed up. Meek told me you sent me up. Detectives even came to my house questioning me, even though there was no evidence of my involvement. I previewed Meek to what was going on in the city so he could cover himself and just be aware. And then he went and turned that into something else. I got Meek on the phone and I was like, you told Sean. And he was like, I ain't tell that fat mother effer nothing. So I said, you know what, we're gonna fix this. I call Sean Kingston on three-way, and Meek Mill starts going off on Sean Kingston. I ain't tell you nothing, and Sean Kingston said, yes you did, so I just hung up the phone. Now, this sounds like some kindergarten stuff, some elementary school level beef. Like, Meek Mill said you stole my toy. No, I didn't, but he's a tattletale and he said you did. Keep in mind, at this point, the game was 35 years old starting this beef. And there's countless others. He was rapping about
This was 2016 when it fall. So Game had to be like 36. Game was 36.
grabbing Kanye's ex, Kim K, by her throat. He jumped into a beef with Lil Durk just to defend Tyga. He beefed Chris Brown over his ex. Him and Waka Flocka Flame went at it on IG. Same with Gucci Mane. He was trying to start beef with Jay-Z for half a decade, but Jay-Z just called him a groupie. He said Kanye West did more for his
Jay barely responded to Game.
career in 2 weeks than Dr. Dre did in 20 years. Keep in mind, Dr. Dre's the one who signed the Game and originally linked him up with 50 Cent. Speaking of 50 Cent, we can't forget about his beef with Game either. That whole GU Not era, his Joe Budden beef, I'm forgetting some. But again, I have a whole breakdown
Yuck mouth beef, meth is bleak.
on my channel that I'll leave in the description where I
40 Glock.
describe every single beef that the Game has ever been a part of. But I think why the Game's music today can't get that same attention or praise that it once did is because he's no longer an underdog like after he was dropped from G-Unit and made One Blood. Like, yeah, for a while people forget that the Game was actually viewed as that beloved underdog when Dr. Dre and 50 Cent kind of abandoned him for his second album, and many people counted him out. They thought that 50 Cent was responsible for the success of the Game's first album and that he wouldn't be able to recreate that magic, but he definitely showed you guys that he could stand on his own when he dropped his album The Doctor's Advocate. But again, that was in 2006, right? At this point, the Game has been teasing his retirement since 2008. He announced 3 different retirements on 3 different albums, but then came back with new projects.
I heard he's gonna drop a documentary 3 next year, 2025.
Sold less and less each and every time. He's not liked by the industry because he'll smile in your face one day, then start a beef with you the next day for no reason. He called out Eminem for his music never being played in clubs, and Eminem made a great point when he said, your music is only played in the clubs because you're 44 years old and you still perform in clubs. And that's the best way to describe the Game right now. 44 years old and still performing in clubs. No rapper who dropped hits like How We Do or an album like The Documentary should still be performing in clubs 20 years later. But speaking of the documentary, he's about to drop the 3rd installment to the documentary series. Now, I'm excited for this album the same way I'd be excited for a Carter album by Lil Wayne. Like, it seems like with those series is where they have albums that they put the most attention and detail into. Like, I haven't been disappointed with a documentary album, Documentary 1, 2, or 2.5. But ultimately, the fact that he's on his 3rd attempt at trying to recreate the magic of his 20-year-old debut album, The Documentary, says something about the stagnation in Game's career over the last couple years. Like, again, he's a great rapper. The Documentary is a classic album, the same way Get Rich or Die Trying is a classic album. But you don't see 50 Cent making a Get Rich or Die Trying Part 3. And you could say, oh, rappers like Jay-Z or Lil Wayne have album series, but the Carter albums all came out around 1 to 2 years apart, except for the Carter 5 because Birdman was holding it up. Same thing with Jay-Z with his In My Lifetime or Blueprint series. The Game waits 10 years in between documentary albums. Why is that? I believe it's because in between each decade he's busy beefing, attention seeking, dropping tons of music in the process, but due to the beef overshadowing the music, it doesn't hit commercially the way that he probably hopes. So he goes back to that tried and true method of milking that nostalgia by dropping another documentary album. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But if you're still performing in clubs and starting beefs to avoid going broke, then there might be some things in your life going on that need fixing. Just my 2 cents, and I'm sure 50 Cent would agree. But let me know if you agree in the comments. Like, what could the Game possibly do to reach that same level of commercial success or critical acclaim that he once had? And I know we love a good beef. Like, obviously that Drake and Kendrick beef just revived and brought in a new energy into hip-hop that we haven't seen in years. But at what point do we take a step back and say, all this conflict is not worth it, right? A lot of the beefs that the Game has been a part of have not yielded the fans any strong diss tracks, any memorable moments. It was a lot of just back and forth on Instagram. It was a lot of inheriting other rappers' beefs. He was inheriting 50 Cent's beefs back in the day. He was inheriting Lil Wayne's beef with Young Thug. He was almost inheriting that beef that Drake had with Meek Mill by starting his own problem with Meek Mill. And that's why I compared it to a fat kid smelling McDonald's. Like, that fat kid knows McDonald's exists, he probably speaks highly of it, but it triggers a way different reaction once he smells those fries or those burgers sizzling, right? It's the same thing with the game. Like, even on this new track, he's taking the peaceful approach, he's reflecting on his life and his beefs in a mature way. It seems like he's almost trying to put them to rest, which he does a lot of times with his beefs. He often backpedals and tries to make things right with the people that he beefs with. But again, once he smells new beef sizzling, no Diddy, he tries to jump in on it. And as a result, that's just part of his legacy now, whether he likes it or not, whether it's good or bad. But let me know what you guys think, if it's good or bad. Are you excited for the documentary 3? What's crazy is the game's been rapping for so long, I think at this point he's put out more albums in his own career than all the other G-Unit members have combined. But anyways, again, let me know your guys' thoughts.
Okay, that's the vid. So yeah, bro, like, let me know what y'all think about the game, bro. About, like, you know, him beefing with rappers and all that stuff. Do y'all feel like it's justified, or y'all think it's not justified? Let me know, bro. And comment down below, what do you, like, how y'all feel about the game possibly having a documentary 3.